All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. We are in the heat of the summer, but with that said, football is right around the corner. And before you know it, we will be kicking off another college football season as it is set to begin in a little bit less than a month. And with that said, coming into this season, these are my top 25 teams for the 2023 campaign. Number one for me, I've got to go with the champs, and I'm talking about the two-time defending national champions, the Georgia Bulldogs. And do the Dogs have what it takes to make it three consecutive national championships? Kirby Smart, in a very short time, has amassed a factory down there in Georgia. You look at the running back position, you look at the defensive side of the football, and Georgia's had just enough offense over the last couple of years to get it done. But I think, some people might want to count out Georgia due to the fact that they have to replace quarterback Stetson Bennett. But with that said, there is still plenty of talent in Athens on this team. You look at the fact that Georgia has not lost a game since the 2021 SEC championship game. Obviously, they have to replace Stetson Bennett, but more than likely it's going to be redshirt junior Carson Beck at quarterback. But you look at the talent around Carson Beck at Georgia. You still got tight end Brock Bowers, arguably the best tight end in the nation. He's probably going to win the Mackey Award and he's going to be an All American. You look at wide receiver Lad McConkey, and he's one of those guys that, you know what, he has that deceptive speed. He's a very good route runner. And basically, every time you see him catching the ball, he's typically wide open. So that just gives you an idea of the elusiveness that he brings to the table. You look at the stellar running backs that Georgia has, and I'm talking about Kendall Milton and Dejon Edwards. And then you look at this defense. Yes, Georgia lost some talent on the defensive side of the ball, but you still got two studs at middle linebacker and Smale Munden Jr. and Jamon Demas Johnson. So the question is going to be, is Georgia vulnerable? Yes, they've lost some talent from last year's team or the last couple of national championships. But with that said, I think playing in the SEC East is going to help them. They don't have to face the gauntlet, if you will, like they would if they were in the West. Two games to keep an eye on for Georgia that could possibly derail them. Them hosting Ole Miss on the 11th of November, and then the week after that, them going to Knoxville to take on Tennessee. But nonetheless, I still think Georgia is going to have a big time say in who wins the national championship this year. Number two, I'm going to go with the men of Troy, and I'm talking about the USC Trojans in their last year in the Pac 12. They have arguably the best player in the country at quarterback in Caleb Williams, as he's looking to do something that has not been done in almost 50 years. And of course, Archie Griffin did it for the Ohio State University. And I'm talking about winning consecutive Heisman trophies. But it's not just all about Caleb Williams for SC. You got senior running back Austin Jones, junior wide receiver Mario Williams, and they also had three seniors on this offensive line for head coach Lincoln Riley, excuse me. But for USC, they've got to get better defensively, as they were 106th in the nation last year in that category. You got junior linebacker Eric Gentry along with junior strong safety Kalen Bullock. But for the men of Troy, there's going to be a lot of hype there, but they are definitely facing a difficult schedule. Remember, USC was on the verge of getting to the college football playoff last year. And of course, those two losses to Utah, most notably the one in the Pac 12 championship game out in Vegas, ended that. SC has another tough schedule. On the 9th of September, they host Stanford. And I know people are going to say, well, it's Stanford. Yes, but it's the historical factor because USC is getting ready to leave for the Big Ten. And people on the East Coast may not understand how important, how vital that contest between USC and Stanford has been to the Pac 10, Pac 12, Pac 8, whatever you want to call it, for so many years. And of course, that is going to be going by the wayside. On the 14th of October, USC will travel to Notre Dame to take on the Fighting Irish, which is never an easy game. The week after that, USC will host Utah. And of course, You think about it, since Utah has joined the Pac-12 conference, they have consistently been a thorn in the side of the Trojans. On November 4th, USC will host Washington in a contest that could be a Pac-12 championship game preview. Right after that, USC has to go to Eugene the following week to take on a very good Oregon team. And then, of course, the 18th of November, when they host UCLA at the Coliseum. Number three, I'm going to go with Michigan, as there is no doubt that Michigan football is back. In each of the last 2 years, the Wolverines have won the Big Ten and gotten to the college football playoff, but they've been unfortunate to get past the semis. But will this year be better for Jim Harbaugh, where he's looking to lead his alma mater to a national championship? Of course, there is a suspension looming for Harbaugh. Um, coming from the NCAA. Let's see how many games that he misses. But still, this is a loaded Michigan team right here. You got junior quarterback JJ McCarthy, a Heisman candidate, in my opinion, senior running back Blake Corum, and then Donovan Edwards. And of course, we saw Donovan Edwards, really chip in when Blake Corum was lost late in that season. You go back to that Ohio State game last year, and when Michigan was able to dominate the second half, they did it with their D, and they also did it with their running game as Donovan Edwards took over. So now you have a combo of backs right there, and I guarantee you, Michigan's still going to try to run the football down people's throats, especially when you look at this experienced offensive line. Four seniors and a grad transfer up front for the Maize and Blue. Michigan was sixth in the nation last year in total defense. They should once again be stout. I look at junior middle linebacker Junior Colson, a Butkus Award candidate, in my opinion, and he has all the tools to be one of the best defenders in the nation this season. You also look at sophomore free safety Rod Moore, as there is talent on both sides of the ball for Michigan. On October 7th, the Wolverines will travel to take on the Golden Gophers of Minnesota. On the 21st, they will travel to East Lansing to take on Michigan State. And you go back 2 years ago, they had themselves a thriller between the Spartans and the Wolverines in East Lansing. On November 11th, Michigan will travel to Happy Valley to take on Penn State, which is typically a tough game for Michigan. The 18th of October, Michigan will travel to take on Maryland. And Maryland is a team that they're one of the teams that none of the big boys want to face late in the season since they've come to the Big Ten. They have always been a thorn in the side since joining that conference. And then, of course, the big one in Ann Arbor on Thanksgiving weekend, that Saturday, when the Wolverines host the Ohio State Buckeyes. Alex, what's going on? You're saying South Carolina's upset Georgia. That could be a possibility right there. You look at South Carolina, they are an improving team. And, South Carolina under Shane Beamer, they're one of those teams right there. They're a team that, a lot of people don't want to face around the SEC. Very quickly, he has brought some grit with him from Blacksburg to Columbia. And it's going to be interesting to see what the Gamecocks look like this season. I got plenty more to talk about them when I talk about the Southeastern Conference in the coming days. Number four, I'm going to go with the Ohio State Buckeyes. And of course, so close yet so far. Ohio State played good enough to beat Georgia last year in the Peach Bowl. They had what it took to win a national championship, and they just fell just short. But head coach Ryan Day continues to win for the Buckeyes. And it's going to be interesting to see if this is going to be the year that he and Ohio State are the last team standing. Now, Ohio State is another one of those football factories, which means that you have a lot of talent to replace from last year's team. Most notably, quarterback CJ Stroud, who was taken second overall in this year's NFL draft by the Houston Texans. But you look at this Ohio State team, more than likely it's going to be junior Kyle McCord at quarterback. But whomever the quarterback is for Ohio State, he's going to have talent around him. You look at this backfield with Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson. It's kind of like thunder and lightning with what they bring to the table as far as being runners. But then the wide receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr., if he was eligible, he would have been a top 5 pick this past spring in the NFL draft. So, of course, the NFL's lost is Ohio State's gain, as Marvin Harrison Jr. is a big difference maker. If you don't believe me, go back and watch that Peach Bowl and see how things changed for Georgia when Marvin Harrison was knocked out of that contest. They could not stop this Ohio State offense. And if you want to focus on Marvin Harrison Jr., then you still got to worry about Emeka Egbuka. No seniors on the offensive line for the Buckeyes, but I think as the season progresses, this unit is going to gel. I'm looking at Tommy Eichenberg, the middle linebacker for Ohio State, a Butkus Award candidate right there. I also look at senior strong safety Lathan Ransom, who plays like another linebacker on the field. For Ohio State on the 23rd of September, they'll be traveling to South Bend to take on Notre Dame. And if you go back to last year, Notre Dame gave them some stiff competition out there in Columbus. So it's going to be interesting to see right there. On the 21st of October, Ohio State will host Penn State. And remember, that was a close game for about 3 quarters last year at Happy Valley before the Buckeyes pulled away. On the 28th, Ohio State will be at Camp Randall to take on Wisconsin. And then, of course, the big one to end the regular season when they travel to Ann Arbor to take on Michigan. Number 5, I'm going to go with the Noles, and I'm talking about Florida State. And of course, the big question is going to be, are the Seminoles back? They won 10 games last year for the first time since 2016 when Jimbo Fisher was still the head coach. But credit to Mike Norvell as he has been building steadily each and every year in Tallahassee, and his team continues to improve. You look at senior quarterback Jordan Travis, one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. There's plenty of talent on offense for Florida State with running back Trey Benson, wide receiver Johnny Wilson, and then, of course, wide receiver Keon Coleman, the Michigan State transfer. Defensively, I look at Jared Verse at defensive end, one of the best pass rushers in the nation. And then you also have outside linebacker Tatum Bethune. So for Florida State, I think they're going to be in the mix all season long. They get it going right off the bat on September 3rd when they take on LSU in Orlando. Remember, this was a good game last year that got overshadowed by some people when Florida State and LSU met in the Superdome. But nonetheless, September 23rd, the big one when Florida State takes on Clemson. These two teams have what it takes to win the ACC. So that's going to be a very important battle there. On the 4th of November, Florida State's going to be at Pitt. A little bit later in the season, a little bit colder. Will Florida State have a tough contest on their hands? We got to wait and see. On November 11th, Florida State will host Miami. And I think this could be the year where this game starts to have more meaning again. You remember there was a time when Florida State versus Miami was the game for college football. No way fans or buts about it. And then, of course, they finished their regular season on the 25th of November in Gainesville against the Florida Gators. For number 6, I'm going to go with the team that Florida State opened their season against last year, the LSU Tigers. And of course, last year, there were some people who questioned LSU for hiring Brian Kelly after they lost their season opener at the Superdome to Florida State. But those doubts quickly were evaporated as people were soon singing the praises of Kelly after he was able to lead the Bayou Bengals to the SEC championship game. He's got plenty of key talent returning to Baton Rouge, and I think this team could make a push for the college football playoff. You got senior quarterback Jaden Daniels, and the former Arizona State quarterback did not have an issue as far as getting adjusted from the Pac 12 to the SEC, as he was one of the better dual threat quarterbacks last year in that conference. And I think he's going to do it again. I like junior wide receiver Malik Neighbors. And then you also have tight end Mason Taylor. And I'm going to highlight him because if you followed Brian Kelly's coaching career, whether it was at Central Michigan, Cincinnati, or Notre Dame, he has always had a knack for developing tight ends. Just look at some of the tight ends in the National Football League now that came through the Brian Kelly system, regardless of the school that he was at. Also, keep an eye out for sophomore middle linebacker Harold Perkins Jr., as LSU will once again be one of the top teams in the SEC. Of course, I talked about the contest on September 3rd in Orlando when they take on Florida State. It's going to be an important start for both LSU and the Noles in that one. Then on September 23rd, LSU rather will host Arkansas. September 30th, this could be a tough game when LSU travels to Oxford to take on Ole Miss. Then, of course, the rematch on November 4th. LSU this time will be traveling to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. And of course, you remember that game last year in Baton Rouge. It was a thriller, and that was a game right there that derailed Alabama's chances to get to the playoff. On November 11th, LSU will host Florida, and then they finish their regular season at home against Texas A&M. Number 7, I'm going to go with the Crimson Tide of Alabama, and it's a little low for them in the rankings compared to where they've been in recent years. But nonetheless, Alabama is still one of the better teams in college football as the kingdom that Nick Saban has created in Tuscaloosa continues to go on. A lot of differences this year for Alabama compared to last year. Tommy Rees, the former Notre Dame quarterback and offensive coordinator, is now the new offensive coordinator for the Crimson Tide. Of course, no more Bryce Young at quarterback. Will it be Jalen Milroe or Tyler Bushner at quarterback this year for Alabama? Of course, Jalen Milroe had some time last year when Bryce Young was injured. To me, it wouldn't surprise me if Nick Saban rotated quarterbacks throughout this entire season and sometimes even rotated quarterbacks in games. You've got Ja'Cory Brooks at wide receiver, and you got Jermaine Burton. And then I'm looking at this defense, and I think this defense is going to have to be much better than they were at times last year. You lost some talent on that side, of course, with Will Anderson now in the NFL, but you still got outside linebacker Dallas Turner. I also look at sophomore middle linebacker Deontay Lawson, and he has the potential to be the next special defender at Alabama because, of course, Saban coaches up that side of the ball. And, regardless of which level it is, defensive line, the linebackers, or in the secondary, it's always some special defenders that come through his program. And then, of course, in the secondary, Kool-Aid McKinstry, but not only with his ability as a defender, also his ability on special teams, both as a kick and punt returner. So, with that said, will the Tide have a say in the playoff race? Absolutely, but they are going to have themselves a very tough schedule if they want to be in that Final Four. They will host Texas, and soon to be Texas, that will be joining the SEC next year. And if you go back last year, both of these teams met in Austin, and it was a thriller. September 23rd, uh, Alabama will host Ole Miss, and in recent years, Ole Miss has been a thorn in the side of the Crimson Tide. On October 7th, Alabama will travel to College Station to take on Texas A&M, and of course, a couple of years ago, Nick Saban made some comments about the Texas A&M program that the people in College Station, I am sure, have not forgotten. On the 21st of October, the third Saturday in October, Alabama will host Tennessee. And for the first time in a long time, this game has a little different, more meaning. Why? Because Tennessee, of course, ended Alabama's undefeated season last year in Knoxville. And I guarantee you that the folks in Tuscaloosa have not forgotten that. Of course, on the 4th of November, Alabama will host LSU. So you got the two teams that prevented Alabama from making the playoff last year. It's going to be interesting to see how the Crimson Tide respond to that one. Late in the season, on November 11th, we'll see Alabama travel to Lexington to take on the Kentucky Wildcats, and then of course the Iron Bowl on the 25th when they travel to take on the new look Auburn Tigers. Number 8, I'm going to go with Oregon, and of course we saw year one for the Ducks under head coach Dan Lanning be a success as they were in the top 25 all year long, while flirting with winning the Pac-12. And this time around, I think the Ducks will not only flirt with winning the Pac 12, they have what it takes to be a college football playoff team. Bo Nix coming back at quarterback was a huge plus for the Ducks. You look at this offense, you got two solid running backs with Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington. And then you also look at wide receiver Troy Franklin. 8 seniors starting on defense for the Ducks. And you cannot overlook that, especially in the Pac 12. I look at the Ducks. On September 9th, they'll travel to Lubbock to take on Texas Tech. On the 14th of October, they're at Washington. That is a big game right there. On the 28th of October, they got to go to Salt Lake to take on Utah. And of course, Utah has been a tough team to beat, especially at Rice Echo Stadium since coming to the Pac 12. On the 11th of November, Oregon will host USC, a big time game there. And then, of course, the Civil War on the 24th of November when they host Oregon State. At number nine, I'm going to go with the Washington Huskies. And you look at Caleb DeBoer, he won 11 games in his first year in Seattle, and he once again has a special team like Bo Nix returning to Oregon. Michael Penix Jr., the former Indiana quarterback, coming back for his senior year at Washington changes things because this kid has the potential to be a first round quarterback next spring in the 2024 draft. You look at junior running back Cameron Davis, who, gives this Huskies offense balance because you look at this passing game with Penix. It's not just about him. You look at a trio of solid wide receivers in Rome Undunze, Jalen McMillan, and Jalen Polk. Also, keep an eye on tight end Jake Westover because it's one of those things where if you focus too much on these receivers, Jake Westover can do some things. Defensively, I look at linebacker Alfonso Tupatala as well as defensive end Braylon Trice to have an impact for this team. Defensively, Washington has seven senior defensive starters on that side of the ball, and I think that could have an impact for this Huskies team. Right off the bat, Washington will host Boise State, an always tough Boise State team out of the Mountain West Conference. Before going to take on Michigan State in East Lansing on the 16th. And if you remember, the Spartans went west last year as a ranked team, and they got it handed to them courtesy of the Huskies. On the 14th, a big time clash at home with Oregon. On November 4th, they got to travel to the Coliseum to take on USC, which is followed by them hosting Utah on the 11th. They're at Oregon State on the 18th of November, and then they finish up at home in the Apple Cup with Washington State. Number 10, I'm going to go with Clemson as the Tigers want to continue being a force on the college football scene. You're talking about a team that has won the ACC in 8 out of the last 9 years under head coach Dabo Sweeney. No more DJ Hewitt quarterback. He's at Oregon State, but it's going to be sophomore quarterback Cade Klubnik. And this passing offense for Clemson has to improve as they were 66th in the nation. But Clemson can and will uh, run the football. And I think you can see a big time impact, from junior running back Will Shipley. Sophomore wide receiver Antonio Williams. Will he be able to improve in this passing offense for Clemson? We got to wait and see. But I still think the Tigers' bread and butter is going to be what they can do defensively. You look at middle linebacker Jeremiah Trotter Jr., a defensive player of the year candidate in the ACC. You also look at outside linebacker Barrett Carter. And this Clemson team has a lot of experience on the defensive side of the ball. And that's going to be important, especially in the early stages of this season. On September 23rd, the Tigers will host Florida State. And like I said before, this is a contest that will go a long way in determining who's going to win the ACC. On the 30th of September, Clemson will travel up north to take on Syracuse. And this is a game where Clemson has struggled, in recent years going up north to take on Syracuse. On the 21st of October, Clemson will host an improving Miami team. On the 4th of November, they will travel to take on, or pardon me, they will host Notre Dame. And if you remember last year, that was the game that really turned things downwards, if you will, for the second half of the season for the Tigers. On the 18th of November, Clemson will host North Carolina. Of course, they faced each other in the ACC championship game last year. And then on the 25th of November, they will travel to take on South Carolina. But I look at this Clemson team, they definitely have what it takes to be one of the better teams in the nation this year. Number 11, I'm going to go with Notre Dame. It's one of those where you look at the Irish last year. Uh, and it's one of those situations where, they started off slow under first year head coach Marcus Freeman, but, the season was still a success. Of course, losing to Ohio State, and then the eye opener was losing at home to Marshall. But they did respond by winning 9 of their last 11 to finish in the top 20. So let's see what Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame can do here for an encore. Tommy Reese, he's no longer the offensive coordinator for the Fighting Irish as he took the Alabama job, but in steps Gerard Parker. You also look at quarterback Sam Hartman, and this is going to be the big one right here because Not a lot of people, in my opinion, are talking about this. Sam Hartman had some very good years at Wake Forest, and now he's coming into this Notre Dame offense, and I think he can have an impact there. Defensively, I look at J.D. Bertrand, the returning middle linebacker, and then cornerback Benjamin Morrison. He had 6 picks last year as a true freshman. What is he going to be able to do as he looks to avoid that sophomore jinx? We got to wait and see. The Irish, they got 9 starters on defense returning from last year's team. That's going to be important for Notre Dame as they look to, play off of that experience as they look to once again be a top team on the scene. So Notre Dame gets things started right away next month. They got to go to Dublin to take on Navy, but then on the 9th of September, they're going to travel to take on NC State. On the 23rd of September, they will host Ohio State in a big contest. On the 14th of October, they will host USC. They're at Clemson November 4th. That's going to be a big one right there. And then they take on Wake Forest in South Bend on the 18th. So it's kind of an homecoming, if you will, for their new quarterback, Sam Hartman. At number 12, I'm going to go with the Penn State Nittany Lions, as we saw them begin the season unranked last year for the first time since 2016. And just like 2016, Penn State would finish that year with a Rose Bowl appearance. Only this time around, the Nittany Lions would win the Rose Bowl for the first time in 28 years. And of course, Penn State head coach James Franklin does have some holes to fill on this Penn State team from last year's squad, but will they once again be a force? Replacing Sean Clifford at quarterback is going to be the biggest thing for the Nittany Lions. Will it be Drew Allar or will it be somebody else? We got to wait and see. But nonetheless, I look at the strength of this Penn State offense, which is their running game with sophomores Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. 3 seniors on the offensive line for Penn State. That's going to be big. And then defensively, I'm looking at outside linebacker Abdul Carter, and defensive end Chop Robinson, along with cornerback Kalen King. So on the 2nd of September, we're going to see Penn State host West Virginia. And of course, this used to be a big time contest when both of these teams were on the independent level. But on the 16th of September, we're going to see Penn State travel to Champaign to take on an improving Illinois team under Brett Bielema. On the 23rd, Penn State will host Iowa, which is always a tough game. On the 21st of October, Penn State's going to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes. And then on the 4th of November, they're going to travel to take on Maryland in College Park. And like I said before, Maryland late in the season could be tough. But then the week after that, Penn State's got to come back home for Michigan. And then, of course, on the 24th of November, Penn State's going to be in Detroit at Ford Field taking on Michigan State. Number 13, I'm going to go with the Utes of Utah, as it's hard to overlook the success that this team has had under head coach Kyle Whittingham, as they've had a winning season in each of the last 9 years, while they've appeared in the Rose Bowl in the last 2. Senior quarterback Cam Rising. This kid, to me, it's unfortunate that, we saw him get hurt in each of the last 2 Rose Bowls, because that really changed the dynamic for this Utah squad. But this kid is a very special collegiate player. Brett Keithy at tight end. He went out with injury last year because it was the combo of him and Dalton Kincaid last year for this Utah offense. And of course, with Keithy, when he went out, it changed things. But I think he's going to come back and have an impact on this offense on the Utes. No seniors on the offensive line for Utah, so they got to work on that experience. But then defensively, Utah just continues to get it done. And I'm keeping an eye out for linebacker Kareem Reed. It's not pretty, but Utah just simply keeps winning. And they've got a big game on the 31st of August when they host the Florida Gators, because, you know, it's tough for Utah to get those bigger programs to come out to Rice Eccles and play them. But of course, we saw Michigan go out there a couple of years ago, and now they're having a home and home with Florida. Of course, they went to Gainesville last year to start their season, and Florida upset them. On the 9th of September, Utah will travel to Waco to take on Baylor out of the Big 12. They'll be home for UCLA on the 23rd of September, at Oregon State on the 29th of September. And Corvallis is one of those places. It can be tricky at times for teams to go up there and win, at the Coliseum at USC on the 21st of October. And of course, I guarantee you, USC has this game circled on their calendars. But like I said before, Utah has been a thorn in the side of the Trojans since coming to the Pac 12. On the 28th of October, Utah will host Oregon in a contest that could have Pac 12 championship game implications. And then on top of that, on the 11th of November, Utah is going to travel to Seattle to take on Washington. At number 14, I'm rolling with the Ole Miss Rebels. And you look at this team, it was a four-game losing streak at the end of the season last year that really dampened that strong start for Lane Kiffin and his bunch. But the expectations in Oxford have changed since he has taken over, as they have been one of the better teams in college football. You look at junior quarterback Jackson Dart, but for me, the bread for this team is buttered rather by sophomore running back Quinshawn Judkins. We saw what he did last year, and if he was able to have left college after his first year, I really do feel he would have been a first round pick last year. That's how good he is. Eight seniors and a grad transfer starting on defense for Ole Miss. That's going to be important as they look to keep up in the SEC. And they got themselves a tough schedule in the SEC West. On the 23rd of September, they're traveling to take on Alabama, which is followed by them hosting LSU on the 30th. They'll take on Arkansas on the 7th of October, and then they're at Auburn on the 21st of October before hosting Texas A&M on November 4th, at Georgia on November 11th. That could be a big game for both of these teams right here. And then, of course, the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State on the 23rd of November. At 15, I'm going to go with the Longhorns, and I'm talking about that team from Austin, the Texas Longhorns, as this could be the year that they could move up into the top 10. We got to wait and see. It's year number 3 for Steve Sarkisian in Austin, and all 5 of the Longhorns' losses last year were by a touchdown or less. So let's see if Texas, can get over that hump and take that next step. And if they are able to, they should be a top 10 team at some point this year. The quarterback room, is it going to be sophomore Quinn Ewers, or are we going to see the highly touted freshman Arch Manning take over the reins for Texas this year? We got to wait and see. Replacing Bijan Robinson. We've seen what this young man meant to this Texas program over the last couple of years at running back. And it's going to be interesting to see if sophomore Jonathan Brooks, can fill that bull void and be the next great Texas ball carrier. Only time is going to tell. You still got wide receiver Xavier Worthy. But then for me on the defensive side of the ball for Texas, I'm looking at middle linebacker Jalen Ford, a Butkus Award candidate, as well as defensive end Baron Sorrell. Talked about the game on the 9th of September when they traveled to take on Alabama. On the 23rd of September, Texas will be at Baylor. And this has been a very difficult game for quite some time for the Longhorns. Of course, Texas meets Oklahoma in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl on October 7th. But then a big one that some people might overlook, on the 21st of October, Texas is going to be at Houston. And of course, Houston is now in the Big 12. Of course, this is transition time for the Big 12 because Texas and Oklahoma are getting ready to leave. Colorado's coming in next year. They've got some new programs coming in along with Houston this year. But you got to go back to another generation. And I'm talking about the old Southwest Conference. And this was a big game when it came down to Texas taking on Houston. So now they get to renew some of those old Southwest Conference pleasantries, if you will, just for 1 year. On the 11th of November, Texas will be at TCU, and then they finish in Ames as far as like the toughest games on their schedule on the 18th of November against Iowa State. Number 16, I'm going to go with Arkansas. And of course, the SEC West is once again a very stacked division. So let's see how the Razorbacks going to be able to fare there. You got quarterback KJ Jefferson, one of the better dual threats in the nation, hands down. Him and Raheem Sanders, they're going to be the engine that keeps this Arkansas team afloat. No more Drew Sanders and Bumper Pool defensively for the Razorbacks, but I still like sophomore middle linebacker Chris Paul Jr. as well as senior cornerback Dwight McGlothern for head coach Sam Pittman. A loaded schedule for the Hogs. They host BYU on the 16th of September. They're at LSU on the 23rd of September. They take on Texas A&M in Arlington on the 30th of September. They're at Ole Miss on the 7th of October. They're at Alabama on the 14th. So that's a tough back-to-back right there. You're talking about at Ole Miss and at Alabama in consecutive weeks. That's a brutal schedule. On the 4th of November, Arkansas will be at Florida. And then on the 24th of November, they're going to take on Mizzou. Number 17, I'm going to go with the Broncos out of the Mountain West, and I'm talking about Boise State. They won 10 games last year for head coach Andy Avalos, and they have the potential to once again be strong here in 2023. You look at sophomore quarterback Taylor Green, arguably the best dual threat quarterback in the Mountain West. And I think as Boise wins and continues to win this year, he's going to get some more recognition and attention as the season goes along. You look at this running game for the Broncos with running back George Halani as well as running back Ashton Genty. They are a kind of like a thunder and lightning duo, if you will. And of course, it's more of a triple threat once you bring quarterback Taylor Green into the mix as well. Defensively for the Broncos, keep an eye out for free safety Rodney Robinson as well as outside linebacker DJ Schramm. A big game for Boise State and the Mountain West when they travel to take on Washington on the 2nd of September. Then after that, they host UCF on the 9th of September. On the 22nd, they're at San Diego State. The 30th, they're at Memphis out of the American Conference. The 4th, they're at Fresno State. And remember, Fresno State faced Boise State twice last year. Boise knocked them off in the regular season. Fresno State beat them at Boise in the conference championship game. And then on the 24th, they will host Air Force. On the number 18, I'm going to go with the Tar Heels of North Carolina out of the ACC. We saw North Carolina get off to that strong 9-1 start last year before things came apart. They lost their last 4 games, including losing to Clemson in the ACC championship game. But let's see how the Tar Heels are going to rebound. You have a veteran head coach in Mac Brown who continues to get it done. And then you look at quarterback Drake May. This young man has the potential to be the ACC Offensive Player of the Year, as well as being a first-round pick in next spring's NFL draft. North Carolina was 67th in rushing last season. They got to get Drake May some help on that side of the ball. You got an offensive line that's full of seniors and grad transfers that has to account for something. But then, most importantly, Carolina's got to improve defensively. They were 116th in the nation last year. That is not going to get it done. There's talent there at linebacker with Cedric Gray and Power Eccles, but this unit definitely has to improve. A big time game on the 2nd of September. North Carolina is going to take on South Carolina in Charlotte. So, Alex, if you're still out there checking this out, I guarantee you probably have that game circled right there. On the 9th of September, North Carolina is going to host Appalachian State. And if you remember last year's game, that was a thriller, and North Carolina was basically able to escape with the 2-point win. On the 16th of September, North Carolina will welcome Minnesota out of the Big Ten to Chapel Hill. Their first ACC game of the year on September 23rd, they're at Pitt. A big one on the 14th of October when they host Miami. They're at Clemson. This is a big time game late in the season on the 18th of November. And then, of course, NC are hosting, or they're at NC State rather, on the 25th of November. And if you remember last year, NC State went down there to Chapel Hill and got the win, and they were an injury filled team right there. For number 19, I'm going to go with the Cougars, the new look Cougars, as they're set to join the Big 12 Conference. And when I say Cougars, I mean the BYU Cougars. Kalani Sitake, this talented head coach, continues to get it done for this team out of Provo. You look at the quarterback room for BYU. You got Kedon Slavis, the former USC and Pitt quarterback, who's now going to try his hand with the Brigham Young. 4 seniors on his offensive line is going to be important, but then I look defensively. I look at middle linebacker Ben Bywater, who has the potential to be the potential Big 12 newcomer of the year here in 2023. And it's going to be interesting to see how this Cougar team is going to be able to get acclimated to life in the Big 12. On the 16th of September, they're at Arkansas. And then this is a game that I've circled right here. The 23rd of September, they're in Lawrence to take on Kansas. And that's going to be their first Big 12 conference game right there. On the 14th of October, they're at TCU. On the 28th of October, they're at Texas, and another big one when they welcome Oklahoma to Provo on the 18th of November. Speaking of Oklahoma, I got them at number 20. The expectations, they're always high for the Sooners. They were unable to live up to them last year as it was a tough season. We saw Oklahoma get off to that 3-0 start before they lost 7 out of their last 10, most notably because of their defense, and that definitely has to improve. They were 122nd on that side of the football last year in total defense. You got outside linebacker Danny Stutzman as well as strong safety Billy Bauman Jr., two players to keep an eye on. But of course, the engine that is going to make this team go is senior quarterback Dylan Gabriel. So let's see what year number two under Brent Venables looks like for the Sooners. On the 23rd of September, they're at Cincinnati, another newcomer to the Big 12. On the 30th of September, they host Iowa State, and Iowa State has been a thorn in the side of Oklahoma in recent years. Of course, the big one in Dallas with Texas on the 7th of October. They're at Oklahoma State on the 4th of November, and I cannot stress it enough how tough this game is going to be for Oklahoma. It's the last Bedlam game. And, it's one of those rivalries that it goes under the radar because, for the most part, it's been dominated by Oklahoma. But of course, you think back to their days in the Big Eight before both of them came to the Big 12, and there's some bad blood between the folks in Stillwater and the folks in Norman due to the fact that Oklahoma is set to leave and go to the SEC and leave Oklahoma State behind. And like I talked about it before, they're traveling to Provo on the 18th of November to take on BYU and then finishing up at home versus TCU on the 24th of November. Number 21, I'm going to go with the Vols, and I'm talking about the team, the Tennessee Volunteers. We saw them get up to number two in the rankings at one point last year, as Josh Heupel has really turned things around in Knoxville. You look at quarterback Joe Milton III. He got some seasoning. He already played, but he got some more seasoning last year, if you will, when Hendon Hooker was lost late in the season to that knee injury. And I think that's going to carry over to this year. You got two talented running backs in Jabari Small and Jalen Wright. But this passing game for Tennessee, and you think about Heupel always has a solid passing game, but let's see how senior wide receiver Brew McCoy is going to fare now that he lost his tag team partner in Jalen Hyatt to the NFL. Four seniors and a junior in the offensive line, that accounts for a lot as far as experience for Tennessee. And then I'm looking defensively. The Vols have 8 senior starters on that side of the ball, led by middle linebacker Aaron Beasley. Some games to watch out for Tennessee on the 2nd of September. They will meet Virginia out of the ACC in Nashville. They're at Florida on the 16th of September, and that's always a big game. At Alabama on the 21st, and like I said before, the folks in Tuscaloosa have not forgotten about Tennessee beating them last year. At Missouri on the 11th of November. Missouri is one of those teams. They're kind of like South Carolina. They're kind of like Utah in the Pac-12 late in the season. You don't want to have to face them, especially in their place. And then on the 11th of November, we're going to see them host Georgia. And of course, that was a game last year where, the reality check set in for Tennessee as far as the gap that they still have to go to be a championship team. So let's see what Tennessee is able to do in that contest. For number 22, I'm going to go with NC State and head coach Dave Doran. He brings in the former Virginia quarterback and Brennan Armstrong. You have a talented outside linebacker in Peyton Wilson and one of the best corners in the ACC in Jaden White. Number 23, I'm going to go with TCU. We saw them have a dream season for the ages last year under head coach Sonny Dykes. TCU came out of nowhere to make the college football championship game before, Georgia just basically ran them off of the field in SoFi. A lot of talent to replace for TCU, especially quarterback Max Duggan. Let's see how junior quarterback Chandler Morris does. You got some experience in that offensive line with 4 seniors, so that's going to be important for the Horned Frogs. And then defensively, outside linebacker Johnny Hodges, middle linebacker Jamoy Hodge, and then in that secondary with strong safety Mark Perry and cornerback Bud Clark. A game to keep an eye on for TCU. September 2nd, they're going to host Colorado. And of course, Colorado is coming to the Big 12 next year. But of course, this is the first game for Deion Sanders as the head coach of Colorado. And he has a new look team. So let's see how TCU responds to that. They're at Iowa State on the 7th of October. They're at Manhattan, the Little Apple, on the 21st of October when they take on K-State, the same K-State team that knocked them off in the Big 12 championship game last December. On the 11th of November, they will take on Texas. They will also host Baylor on the 18th. So that's back to back Texas and Baylor. And then they're at Oklahoma on the 24th of November. So that's going to be a tough 3 game stretch right there for the Horned Frogs. For number 24, I'm going to go with UCLA. As you know, this is their swan song along with USC and Colorado in the Pac 12. So no more DTR at quarterback for the Bruins. In steps freshman Dante Moore. They got 3 seniors and a grad transfer up front for Chip Kelly, which is going to be important. And I'm looking at them defensively. I look at their outside linebacker, Laiatua Latu, who to me is a Pac 12 Defensive Player of the Year candidate, and also keep an eye out for sophomore corner Jalen Davies. For UCLA on the 9th of September, they're traveling to take on San Diego State out of the Mountain West. They're at Utah on the 23rd of September, which is always a tough game. They're at Oregon State on the 14th of October. They're at Arizona on the 4th of November. And I circled this game because Arizona went to the Rose Bowl last year and beat UCLA. And then, of course, they're at the Coliseum to take on SC on the 18th of November. And then finally, number 25, I'm going to go with the Tulane Green Wave as they enjoyed a turnaround season for the ages last year. They went from losing 10 games in 2021 to tying a school record with 12 wins last year, which included winning the American Athletic Conference for the first time in program history. And then they also beat USC in the Cotton Bowl. So the course of question is going to be for a lot of people, was last year a fluke or are the Green Wave for real? We're going to see. But nonetheless, they have to replace running back Tyjai Spears. You still have a lot of experience on this offense for Tulane with senior quarterback Michael Pratt. They've also got 4 seniors on this offensive line. And then defensively, keep an eye out for senior corner Jarius Monroe. On the 9th of September, Tulane's going to host Ole Miss. That's a big game for them, this program, and the American Conference. And then on the 13th of October, a big one at Memphis, which has conference championship game implications in the American. So that's my top 25 right there. Some other teams I think to keep an eye out for are going to be Iowa, Oregon State, Illinois, and Miami. But I'm looking at it, it's one of those where there's some potential for some of these teams to move up and really make some noise and make a push for the college football playoff. I'm looking right now at some Pac-12 teams. I'm looking at Oregon and Washington. They could definitely have a say, in this race right here. Also Alabama, because a lot of people are writing them off. Definitely keep an eye out for Florida State, and of course the usual suspects: the Ohio States, the Michigans, and the Georgias of the world. And I'll tell you like this: until somebody knocks them off, they're still the champs. Georgia has been a tough out. They're going to continue to be a tough out. But with that said, overall, I think we are in store for a tremendous 2023 version of the college football season, which is set to begin in less than a month now. And you know what? The last weekend in August is going to be here before you know it. So the excitement is building. College football is in the air. And as in the words of former boxing referee Mills Lane, let's get it on. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time to thank you for tuning into an extended version of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365 that you can check it out. Drop a line to be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Steve Peter, my good brother, how are you doing? It's been a long time. I've missed you. We definitely have to catch up and chat, not only about football, but in life. And it's always, I always appreciate the support from you, my good guy. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off and saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.